Have you ever created a traffic impact study, and if so, approximately how many?
I don't have an exact number, but over 25 years I've completed or reviewed in excess of 100 studies.
And have you ever provided testimony before a court or governmental body in a professional capacity?
Yes.
And approximately how many times?
Over a dozen times.
What types of governmental entities have you provided testimony before?
First class, second class townships and boroughs. I've testified in conditional use hearings, special exception hearings, and I've been qualified as an expert witness. I've also testified in front of this board. Yes.
I now request that the board accept Christopher Bauer as an expert for the purpose of reviewing the traffic impact study.
Very well.
Mr. Bauer, was McMahon Transportation hired on behalf of PennDOT to review and assess the traffic impact study submitted for the proposed Cat 4 casinos in the Commonwealth?
Yes.
And as part of your employment duties, were you tasked with the review and assessment of these traffic impact study, for the proposed Category 4 casino at the Westmoreland Mall?
Yes.
And did McMahon Transportation review a traffic trip generation letter dated May 8, 2019, provided by Gateway Engineers?
Yes.
And can you briefly tell me what information was contained in that letter?
The May traffic trip generation letter included a forecast of the expected trips that would be associated with the casino and the remaining retail at the Westmoreland Mall.
And did McMahon Transportation respond to that letter in June?
Yes.
I'm going to ask to have a copy of that letter marked as OEC Exhibit 1.
Very well.
And what was McMahon Transportation's response to that letter?
The May traffic and trip generation letter included information that indicated that the traffic generation from the casino, along with the remaining retail, to be higher than the estimated trip generation for the Westmoreland Mall at full retail occupancy. Based on PennDOT's TIS guidelines, a full transportation impact study for the development was required.
Okay, and was a traffic impact study then provided to McMahon Transportation in July of this year?
Yes.
And was that July traffic impact study reviewed by McMahon?
Yes, it was.
And when was that study reviewed?
It was completed, the review was completed on July 31st and forwarded to PennDOT Central Office and PennDOT District 12 for their concurrence prior to the issuance of the final review.
And what methodology was used for that review?
Standard industry standards and PennDOT standards for the review of traffic impact studies.
And what was your involvement in that review?
The review and oversight of the review.
And were the results of your review provided to the board?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask to have a copy of those results marked as OEC Exhibit 2.
Very well.
At any time during your review and assessment of that information, did anyone attempt to influence or coerce you into providing a favorable or unfavorable review?
No.
And were you notified of anyone attempting to influence or coerce McMahon Transportation during your review?
No.
Can you tell us who prepared the traffic impact study?
It was prepared for Kyle Brown of Gateway Engineers, and the revised report was completed by Mr. Haber.
Okay, and when was that?
The original was in July and stated in August.
Okay, and can you tell us the purpose of that full traffic impact study?
The study was prepared to determine the effects of the transportation network for the development of a Category 4 casino to be located within the existing Westmoreland Mall in Hempfield Township, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania.
And if you could please provide a summary of your review that has been marked as OEC Exhibit 2.
Based on the information in the traffic impact study, the proposed Category 4 casino would replace 100,000 square foot of currently vacant space, the former Bonton department store, within the existing Westmoreland Mall, and includes 750 slot machines and 30 gaming tables. Westmoreland Mall lies south on the south side of Route 30, east of the city of Greensburg, and includes two directional right and right out accesses to Route 30, one access for westbound US Route 30 via an overpass and ramp system, and a full movement access to Route 30 via Idle Miller Road.
And did the traffic impact study recommend any transportation improvements to the access point of the site?
The review of the capacity analysis shows that the existing study intersections currently operate at acceptable levels of service during the peak hours analyzed. The intersections are projected to continue to operate at levels of service under the opening year 2020, accessible levels of service of the opening year 2020 and projected 2025 future year conditions. The inclusion of the projected trips associated with proposed casino are anticipated to have negligible impact to the overall delay at the intersections during peak hours. As such, the traffic impact study did not offer any improvements.
Okay. And based upon its review, did McMahon Transportation recommend any transportation improvements?
Yes. The applicant and engineer used typical PennDOT-TIS methodology and optimized the traffic signal timing within the traffic simulation software to evaluate the traffic impacts. This is acceptable practice, one that is an industry standard, while the optimization of the traffic signals timing for future without development conditions is standard. We note that the projected optimization of the traffic signal at Route 30 and Sheridan Drive are required to bring the existing movements within capacity and avoid adding delay and queuing to the critical movements. So considering that we have an opening year at 2020, the signal timings were optimized in the software but not out in the field. We suggested that retiming should be part of the TIS mitigation recommendations. We also recommended that a post-opening traffic study be studied to retime existing traffic signals after the opening of the casino, about 2 months after traffic normalizes after the development. The applicant should collect traffic counts, and these counts should be conducted on a typical Friday or Saturday, and optimize the traffic signal timing adjustments placed in the field should they be needed.
And was McMahon Transportation provided with a copy of the revised TIS as described by Stadium?
Yes, it was. The applicant submitted a comment response letter and a revised TIS last night. The submission was reviewed. The applicant has testified that they're willing to complete a post-opening study. This coupled with the revised traffic impact study, the traffic impact study revisions and a comment response letter, the outstanding comments have been addressed satisfactorily.
Okay, so based upon your review of the revised traffic impact study, McMahon Transportation is therefore satisfied that all of their initial concerns were adequately addressed?
Yes, that coupled with the post-development study.
That they discussed, which will include the review of the traffic signal timing?
Correct.
Okay. So based upon the testimony that you were able to listen to today, was that consistent with McMahon Transportation's findings in review of the traffic impact study and the revised traffic impact study?
Yes.
Okay, and was anything presented in that testimony that seemed contrary to any of your findings?
No.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Other questions from Stadium to the witness or for OEC?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Thank you. We will consider both the award of this license and the table games petition later this morning. Now we're going to move on to our next hearing.
Just as one final matter, just ask,
Both of you, yes.
just ask to move the two exhibits into the record.
So moved. Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Chairman, we would like to mark our presentation of Stadium Casino Westmoreland Exhibit 1.
So moved. Thank you. Next up, Presque Isle, petition to modify its gaming floor plan. Again, I would ask that everybody who's going to speak today, please state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. Additionally, at this time, I ask that all non-attorney witnesses who might be testifying today please stand and be sworn at this time.
Would you all raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. You may begin.
Chairman Barish, members of the board, good morning. My name is Kevin Hayes, that's Hayes, of the law firm Doherty Hayes. I appear before you today on behalf of PID LLC and Churchill Downs Incorporated in support of a petition to modify gaming floor plan, which includes a slot machine reduction. Here with me today to describe the proposed modifications and enhancements to Presque Isle Downs gaming floor and to field any questions that the board may have regarding this petition are two representatives from Churchill Downs who have traveled here from Kentucky. Austin Miller, seated to my right, who is the Senior Vice President of Gaming Operations, and John Matter, who is Corporate Counsel with Churchill Downs, seated there at the end. For Presque Isle Downs, we have two familiar faces to the board, our Vice President and General Manager at the property, Kevin O'Sullivan, as well as Dan Kuick, who's the Director of Slot Operations and Sportsbook. In this petition, PID seeks the board's approval of a revised gaming floor plan identified as OP42, which allows for the operation of 1,525 slot machines, 40 table games, and 50 sports wagering kiosks at Presque Isle Downs and Casino. This revised gaming floor plan will maintain the current number of tables and slot machine kiosks. Under the revised gaming floor plan, there will be a reduction of 41 slot machines, which amounts to a 2.62% decrease in the total number of slots that are available for play. As part of this petition, PID had originally requested a reduction of 66 slot machines. However, the Office of Enforcement Counsel had expressed concerns with PID operating at the statutory minimum of 1,500 machines. And in order to address those concerns, PID revised its gaming floor plan to allow for the operation of 1,525 slot machines. The relief requested in this petition is part of a comprehensive and overall plan for enhancing the gaming floor and the overall gaming facility, which has been developed by Churchill Downs Incorporated since the time they took possession of the property in January of this year. As any change relating to a Category 1 facility will impact horse racing and pari-mutuel operations, we have reached out to representatives from the State Horse Racing Commission and provided them with the revised plan and information relating to this proposal. Austin Miller will be the primary presenter at today's hearing. Just briefly, by way of background, Austin has served as the Churchill Downs Senior Vice President of Gaming Operations for the past 6 years, and in that capacity oversees all of Churchill Downs racing and gaming operations at facilities in 8 states, including 4 racetracks and 10 gaming facilities. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to turn it over to Austin Miller.
Very well. Mr. Miller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Austin Miller, AUSTINMILLER. Churchill Downs Incorporated, as you know, purchased Presque Isle Downs and Casino in January of 2019. And as experienced operators, we're laser focused on constantly improving the guest experience and the revenue generating potential of Presque Isle. Since purchasing the property, we've made a number of significant investments with this in mind. Our recent multi-million-dollar investment in sports wagering is just the latest example of our endeavor to grow the business here in Pennsylvania. While there are more improvements to come, we're here before you today to seek your approval to vastly improve the guest experience and facilitate the guest journey throughout our property while interacting with our many offerings that include slots, table games, poker, sports wagering, pari-mutuel wagering, and a variety of food and beverage outlets. We truly appreciate your time and thank you for the opportunity to be before you today. We've always thought of Presque Isle as a great brand. One of our primary interests in that particular property was the loyalty they have built with their local customers. Since purchasing it, we've made a number of investments. So far already this year, to the tune of about $11.1 million, we've added the Bet America retail sports betting outlet, including the license fee. As part of that project, we added 50 self-service terminals, 54 additional large format TVs, replaced 26 other TVs. We replaced the carpet and chairs in the newly rebranded Churchill's Bourbon and Brew restaurant, replaced the guest chairs in table games, replaced the guest chairs in poker, and then added shuffle machines into the poker room. Over the course of the remainder of this year and next year, some additional enhancements to the tune of about $4.2 million will include a one-for-one replacement of 88 slot machines. 88 current underperforming games will be replaced with brand new cutting-edge games. Upgrading the player tracking hardware to provide additional features and functionality for our guests. A complete gaming floor replacement with pathways to guide the guests throughout the facility. And then to reconfigure the gaming floor to create a better guest experience. Speaking of the carpet change, it creates a great opportunity for us. And that opportunity is to relay out the gaming floor and create an experience for the guests. And that new layout will, number one, make it easier for guests to traverse the floor, create opportunities to showcase our newest and most successful slot product, create a much more comfortable gaming experience with smaller bank sizes and fewer middle seats. If you've ever flown on Southwest Airlines and got a C boarding pass, you know what I mean. It will help guide guests to all of our exciting gaming and entertainment options. It will increase the energy and excitement on the floor, and it will increase the visibility of designated smoking versus non-smoking gaming areas. This reduction in game count from 1,566, we're proposing to go down to 1,525 games. It's important to keep in mind that fewer games does not mean less revenue. While our proposed new slot layout will cause a reduction of 41 games, or as Kevin mentioned, 2.6%, it should not have a negative impact on revenue. In fact, our experience tells us it will create an opportunity to grow revenue. A small reduction in game count like we are proposing only impacts revenue if, number one, it constrains supply where there is a shortage of games for guests to play. Two, games being removed are premium or highly sought after games. Three, games from highly advantageous locations are moved to less advantageous or less desirable locations on the gaming floor. According to our proposed plan, we have no issues with constraints on supply. Our occupancy levels are well within our desired parameters. And in fact, our average occupancy today is about 29%, peaks at 59%. 41 games to be removed from the floor are the least sought after and lowest performing games. The average win per unit per day on those games is $32. The floor average is $202. In addition to the benefits already discussed, as I mentioned a little earlier, we'll be replacing on a one-to-one basis 88 other underperforming games with new slot machines. And then games that were formerly hidden in large banks or in a confusing maze of banks will be relocated to more visible, more convenient locations. Under OP 42, you can see this is a diagram of our current gaming layout. If you look at the banks, you'll see a number of 8-packs or 10-packs, 8 games in a bank, or 10 games in a bank, and no real discernible way to maneuver your way around the floor. If you look at the proposed floor plan, it has just 41 fewer games. You can see there are clear pathways throughout the facility, significantly smaller banks, multiple bank configurations, and a better delineation of smoking versus non-smoking games. In terms of timelines, in the fourth quarter, we hope to have replaced all 88 of those games on a one-to-one basis, replaced all of the Sentinel-3 player tracking units with the Encompass units, which give us some additional flexibility in terms of marketing programs for our guests. and then begin the floor reconfiguration into its new, more convenient layout. In the first quarter of 2020, we hope to finish the floor reconfiguration and new gaming layout and then install the new carpet. Obviously, there are a lot of things beyond our control in terms of importing carpet from other countries. We hope to be able to hit these timelines, and obviously, we hope to get all this done as soon as we possibly can. Then just a couple of pictures to help. I know you guys are all familiar with slot machines. The two games on the left are examples of games that are the newest, most technologically advanced games. The two games on the right are examples of a couple of the games that we will take off of the floor. And then on the last page, I mentioned a little bit about utilization, where currently the average is 29%, which is in the first column to your left. In the second column, we peak at about 59% utilization under the 1,566 game format. The two columns on the right, what we did is we used a game count of 1,500, which is 25 less than we proposed to have, and then added 15% volume to that to apply additional pressure on the model. And you can see in the far column on the right-hand side at 3 p.m., even under those more restricted conditions, we would peak at a 71% occupancy level. With that, I'll open up to any questions.
Questions or comments from enforcement counsel?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Beth Manifesto, M-A-N-I-F-E-S-T-O, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Can you tell us, at the conclusion of the requested gaming floor modification, what will the total slot machine count on the floor be?
1,525.
And of that number, can you give us the accompanying percentages as to how many slot machines will be located in the smoking and non-smoking sections?
By square footage is, by statute, I believe, 50% smoking, 50% non-smoking. And we will be, I don't have the exact figure, Dan may, but it's right at 50% games smoking, 50% of the games non-smoking.
Yeah, you want to address that question?
Dan Cook, D-A-N-C-U-I-C. Currently, we're operating right at about 56% smoking and 44% non. With this new reconfiguration, we're going to end up being close to that. We should be right around there. Actually, this may end up being more in favor of the non-smoking slots. It won't go any higher than the 56% smoking that we have currently.
There's not a request to make any changes to the number of table games, correct?
Correct.
And can you tell us how many sports wagering kiosks will be on the gaming floor?
Currently, we have 50.
And can you give us a percentage, or as well as the number of kiosks that appear in the smoking and non-smoking areas?
As it stands, we have 33 kiosks located in non-smoking, 17 in the smoking area. The main driver of this, I'll just elaborate a little bit, is our non-smoking area. The main non-smoking area currently contains 23 of these kiosks, and that is in a non-smoking area, and that will continue to be located in a non-smoking area.
Will there be any staff reductions as a result of changes to the gaming floor as proposed?
No reductions.
Can you provide the square footage of the sportsbook area and what percentage would be smoking versus non-smoking?
The square footage of the sportsbook area is 1,850 square feet. Currently, we have 1,573 square feet dedicated to non-smoking and 277 smoking, so 11.8% is smoking.
Just by way of correction, Mr. Chairman, I think it's 1,574 square feet of non-smoking and 277 smoking.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no other questions.
Do you have any sort of presentation this morning?
We do not, sir.
Any questions or response from petitioners to overseas questions?
So, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, we have no objections to the conditions that they propose in the order.
Okay, are there any exhibits or
Yes.
anything to be moved into evidence here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we would move that the PowerPoint presentation be marked as PID LLC 1 and admitted into the record.
Fine. There was no presentation, evidentiary presentation by you?
No.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments from the board at this time?
Just one clarifying point in your PowerPoint on page 8, proposed gaming floor layout. Could you clarify what the red and black is? Is that the smoking versus the non-smoking? Can you just make it clear to me which is which?
So, Kevin O'Sullivan, O''S-U-L-L-I-V-A-N. Yeah, you did say it correctly. The red is the smoking, the black is non-smoking.
Okay, so when I'm looking at, for example, the dot that says main sportsbook, which looks like it's predominantly in the non-smoking area, where is the 270 square feet of smoking?
They would be the small green dots. Those would be the kiosks that are in the smoking area.
Oh, okay. Okay, but, so if I'm standing in the main sportsbook area, I'm standing in a non-smoking area, not some little niche right next to it that has smokers in it?
You are correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing nothing further, we'll be taking this up in the Office of Chief Counsel's portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, Washington Trotting Association LLC petition to modify their gaming floor at the Meadows Track and Casino. Once again, before we begin, I make sure that you all identify, spell the names prior to any presentation, and also have any non-attorney witnesses that may be called this morning. I'd like to have them stand this morning at this time.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Michael Fabius, F-A-B-I-U-S, representing Washington Trotting Association. With me today are Tony Fabile, Vice President and General Manager, spelled F-R-A-B-B-I-E-L-E. And immediately to my right is Benjamin Baugh, who is Director of Slot Operations. So Baugh is B-A-U-G-H. We are pleased to be here today to present to you another gaming floor plan modification. It's part of a broader investment strategy in the property. Tony will speak broadly to that investment plan. We're obviously here today in particular because the gaming floor plan modification involves a net reduction of 485 slot machines. Then we'll speak to that, we can give you specifics on that reduction, including background about the slot operations and the business judgment, why we've concluded that the net reduction will improve the customer experience and will not affect revenues. So with that, I will turn it over to Tony.
Thank you, Mike. Again, my last name, F-R-A-B-B-I-E-L-E, first name Tony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for your time today. We thought it would be good to start off and walk you through the overall master plan for the Meadows and what we're working on today with the current configuration and the business that we have there. It's a very healthy business, and we strongly believe in that business and how well it performs in Washington County. We want to continue to see that growth for a long period of time underneath the Penn National flag. And it starts with the reinvestment into our food and beverage amenities. We currently are under construction, started that in mid-July, bringing in the Fabio Viviani concepts that have been very successful at our Penn National Racecourse property, Charlestown, and also in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. We expect the Fabio concept to conclude in early November. We'll open with 4 brand new concepts from a food perspective. So we'll have an American concept, an Italian with the Mercato, a Asian offering with Zen, and then also a Joe and Dough, which will be our primary sweets and coffee. We're also placing into that space a 40-seat bar with 36 tap handles that overlooks our racetrack. So we believe that really complements our horse racing business and gives that customer a place to go, completely non-smoking bar to enjoy the experience and amenities that we offer at the property. Another focus for us, and this is part of why we're here today and doing some of the modifications to our floor plan, is we really want to enhance that customer experience and continue to have other amenities that drive them into our property. And we believe entertainment is a great strategy for us to go after to do that. So we currently have the headliner space, which is tucked back in the south side of the property. Back in the corner, we want to bring that forward, bring that marquee forward, so it really invites you into that space and you see it from any vantage point inside of the property. A brand new bar with a rectangle shape that's pulled out into the floor a little bit further with gaming positions on it, as well as about 350 seats that will be inside of the venue. We anticipate this going under construction in October and being complete before we finish 2019. Beyond this, we've also started construction on our brand new cage, which we anticipate opening August 30th, which is currently where our My Choice counter was before, and we just opened our new My Choice for our customers, which is right off the main entry of the floor. In total, including what Ben will talk about from a slots reinvestment standpoint, we're putting over $14 million back into this facility just in our first year of operation. So we're very excited about it. We have a lot going on, and appreciate your time again today. With that, I'll turn it over to Ben so he can start to walk you through some of the things we have going on slot site.
Thank you, Tony. First off, Mr. Chairman of the Board, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today with this proposal. Additionally, we would like to express our gratitude towards the Financial Investigations Unit for the assistance and support that they've extended us during this process. On the topic of the investment in our property, in 2018, the Meadows purchased a new slot system for $4.35 million, enhancing the player experience as it relates to efficiency and use of promotional and My Cash downloads. Furthermore, with the PIN acquisition, there's been a substantial increase in investment to our slot product. This year alone, the Meadows will be spending more than $2.3 million to obtain 126 new cabinets and multiple theme conversions. With all new game purchases, we make a conscious effort to ensure strong presence on all social online platforms in which we are currently active. Historically, in 2009, as it relates to gross terminal revenue, we peaked at $278 million. We've seen a decline in GTR as the market stabilized and became more saturated, having over the last 2 years settled between the $200 and $215 million mark. Coinciding with the stabilization and saturation of the market, the Meadows has been periodically removing slot machines each time with prior PGCB approval to the current number of 2,991 games. This is currently the third most slot machines on any gaming floor in Pennsylvania, with the second lowest win per unit in the state. This proposal seeks a net reduction of 485 slot machines, and furthermore, 3 table games will be removed due to space limitations with the improvement of our amenity set. The table games removed are blackjack table games with a contribution of less than 1/4 of 1% to overall blackjack drop for our facility. We expect no negative effects on GTR or table games revenue due to low overall occupancy and peak utilization. Our current offering of 2,991 slot machines results in a significant oversupply. The chart at left shows our peak weekday, weekend, and average overall occupancy rates for April 1st, 2018 through March 31st of 2019. You can see even on Fridays, our busiest day of the week, on an average of nearly 8 out of 10 machines, more than 2,300 games are unoccupied and available for guest play. At right, you can see that even during our busiest hours by volume and occupancy in this time period, approximately 4 out of 10 machines, nearly 1,200, were unoccupied and available for guest play. During the evaluation, we used a comparison of occupancy at the new proposed count of 2,506 units on our floor, with all other data remaining the same, and we found that we did not exceed 75% occupancy during any 1 hour during this 365-day period. This tells us that our new count still allows ample supply to serve an increased demand. We seek to address this significant oversupply by reducing our machine count by 485 slot machines. The selected machines are among the oldest, least desired, and worst performing on our floor. The reduction will not only better optimize, but build excitement on the floor for all customers and provide the non-smoking customers with more separation from the smoking areas of our floor. From a revenue perspective, this removal is expected to have no negative effect on GTR due to low occupancy results identified during this evaluation. The Meadows will remain the third largest count of slot machines on any casino in Pennsylvania following this proposed reduction. The 2,506 slot machines will be a sufficient quantity to serve demand, and remaining diversity is sufficient so that no one would stop coming to the Meadows because they would not be able to find a desired game of similar style, type, or gameplay. From a team member perspective, the removal will not result in any staffing level changes for operations or surveillance, and the property stands to realize a significant cost savings and reduction of electricity maintenance and repair. Here you will see our gaming floor as it currently stands with 2,991 slot machines. The orange is our current smoking section, and blue non-smoking. As you will see in our after, you can see the non-smoking section is more clearly defined from the smoking section. There's more elbow room and wider aisles for our guests. Further, you'll note that our Vibe Lounge will become non-smoking. In addition to that, our My Choice or player services counter, cage, and both entrances to the casino floor will now be non-smoking, with non-smoking pathways for the non-smoking guests to freely move to a non-smoking section for their desired area of play. With that, I will turn this back over to Vice President and General Manager Tony Rubin.
Thank you, Ben. Before coming in front of you today, we also met with the MSOA board and Kim Hankins to review this plan. And we wanted to share with you that the MSOA is fully in support of our modifications and plans that we have moving forward, and is available if you have any questions for them.
Thank you. With that's our presentation for the morning. I ask that our presentation be moved into evidence of information, and we'll take your questions.
So moved. Counsel.
Beth Manifesto on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. While we do not have a presentation for the board, we do have several follow-up questions. So at the conclusion of all of the requested modifications, you are going to have 2,506 slot machines on the gaming floor, correct?
That is correct.
And at the conclusion, how many table games will be on the casino floor?
85.
And can you give us the percentage of table games in smoking and non-smoking sections? And also, if you would have the numbers that would accompany those percentages.
don't know that we have the percentage breakdown, smoking, non-smoking with table games. And do you know the three that are being removed, are they being removed from smoking, non-smoking?
It'd be removed from non-smoking sections, that will be a smoking section following the reconfiguration.
We can follow up and give you the precise percentage calculation.
Okay. Do you know the number that will remain in each section?
There'll be 8 tables remaining in the non-smoking section, 9 exclusion.
And will there be any staff reductions as a result of the changes to the gaming floor?
Hold on.
What number of slot machines will remain in the non-smoking versus the smoking?
There will be 1,140 games in non-smoking versus 1,366 games in the smoking following the completion of this project.
Okay, so that's a little bit more balanced than the table games, because the majority of the table games will be in non-smoking, in smoking.
Correct.
And I know that you guys have a sports wagering petition pending, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about that, but you are aware that that is a separate part that will be considered for smoking and non-smoking, that has to be 50-50 also.
We are aware of that, and that is being prepared at this point.
I have no further questions.
I have a question. I'm not sure who to direct it to. Counsel, if you try your side. Just eyeballing the 2 charts. Casual observation. Sure looks like a lot less non-smoking area afterwards. If you look at the before and after, the entire right quadrant of the picture, which is non-smoking, okay, in the before becomes smoking in the after. And what I've noticed, I'm not sure if I understand it, a whole chunk of the area that is labeled as blue are pathways leading through smoking areas. But you're labeling, if I understand what I'm reading, I see here, you're labeling it as non-smoking, but there's no non-smoking table games in those areas. It's a pathway looking right in the middle.
Yeah, there are a few tables, not very many, in the non-smoking area, right above the orange on the table game area. You can see it.
Oh, no, I see that. I guess what having looked at a lot of floor plans over the last several years, maybe I'm wrong, but I've never really seen pathways that go through smoking areas being labeled as non-smoking. They're kind of neutral. I mean, there's neither.
I can answer that question.
I'm having a hard time seeing
Understand.
how you end up with these square footages, unless what you're really doing is just counting a lot of pathways as non-smoking. But it's not really a non-smoking gaming area, at least not to my eye.
Well, it is part of the gaming floor. Just because they don't have games on that particular spot, it is part of the game.
But I guess what I'd be curious is to see how somebody's going to police with somebody walking down a pathway with a cigarette. It just seems like it's a pathway, and I guess I don't know how to calculate it, but I'd sure like to know what the balance is when you talk about areas where people can actually game as opposed to walkways. Maybe I'm not being fair, but that's what I see.
I agree with you. You don't have a chart you can show us of before, after, non-smoking
Oh,
versus?
there is. It's go between the two. And that's what I was trying to do, Sean, is what you'll see in the after, the large amount of blue space, there's really no slot machines in it, that it's being labeled as non-smoking. But think that really seems to be what our goals here are.
Can I ask Mr. Chairman a question a different way? If the blue area right in the middle, let's go back to the gaming floor after picture. If the blue area pathway going straight down the middle of the two orange sections in the center, as well as the blue area pathway between the two orange sections, middle and right, were orange, would it meet the required gaming floor non-smoking requirements of our statute? You understand what I'm saying? Let me get up and point at it.
I understood it. Did you see it?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is create a better experience for our smoking and our non-smoking customer through this process. So as you enter into our facility, we want the customer that is a non-smoking customer not to have to be exposed to that. So as you come through our south entrance, our new cage is located right to your left. You can come through there, you can access the new food court and go into that space. You can cut across and you can go into where Vibe is today, or over into the non-gaming space or the non-smoking space without having to have that impede on your experience. I've worked in multiple jurisdictions that have had percentages of smoking. I can tell you it's a challenge everywhere, but our security team is prepared for that challenge, and they will be the ones that will be out there to help enforce that. And when customers are seen in places that they shouldn't be, we will address that.
My question to our enforcement counsel: if this blue pathway between these two orange sections and the blue pathway between those two orange sections, now can you see where I'm pointing?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, if those were designated on the floor plan as smoking, would this plan meet the required statutory requirement that at least 50% of the gaming floor be non-smoking?
I'm not sure because I don't know the measurements of those
Okay,
areas.
that's my question that I'd like to have an answer.
That's where I was headed.
Yes, I knew that.
Thank you very much.
If I may for a moment, the margin of difference in terms of square footage on the smoking and non-smoking, we go back to slide 8. It's 65,123 square feet versus 63,155, so it's about 2,000 square foot difference. That pathway that we're talking about should not be 2,000 square feet. And the key reason that it needs to be a non-smoking pathway is if you look in the top, towards the top right, it's neither blue nor orange. That's the food court. That's an area where we want people to be, non-smoking passengers, non-smoking customers to be able to pass through without walking through a smoking area to get to the food court.
So how does that happen?
Yeah.
They're walking through smoking, smoking spots to get there.
The pathway that's in blue will not be smoking in that area.
No, but you're sitting in the terminal right there. You're sitting there smoking cigarettes. Just because you're changing
Correct. Well,
color doesn't
our
mean
point
there's
is to
not
try
smoke
and
there.
minimize the amount of smoke that would impede on that customer's experience. Because today, it does impede on their experience. And so our point is to try and clean it up as much as we can and do everything that we can to appease both customer bases.
So you're saying currently if that was smoking, people would be standing in the walkway smoking cigarettes, kind of hanging out.
It does happen today, yes.
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So when the person gets up from that slots machine, he has to put his cigarette or her cigarette out to stand in that pathway.
Correct. Or go in a different direction.
Wow. Good luck with that.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, if I may, on the gaming floor after picture, in the blue section, kind of middle, if it's labeled, my eyes aren't good enough. but the section that I think is your Vive bar, it looks like a white trophy, for lack of a better way to say it. Is that what I'm looking at there?
Correct.
Okay, where am I seeing the newly visible headliners bar entertainment area that you talked about reshifting in the forefront?
So if you look to the far right, encompassed in the smoking is the rectangular bar to headliners, and then the seating that goes into the lounge.
Okay, so adjacent to, or right adjacent to the food court, colored neither blue nor yellow, but colored white, is the headliners venue?
Correct.
And when the food court or the headliners venue is not colored blue or red or white, it's because it's non-gaming activity, and that's why it's not in that calculation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Anything to be moved that has already been moved and amendments here?
Not at our end, thank you.
Great. No further questions. We'll be taking this matter up shortly as well. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Last hearing today, Holdings Acquisition, LLP, petition to modify the gaming floor of the Workers Casino. Good morning. Good morning. As always, someone's going to be testifying today. Please stand and be sworn by the court reporter.
You swear affirm that testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good morning, thank you. John Donnelly, appearing on behalf of Holding Acquisition Co., better known as Rivers Pittsburgh. We are here in very exciting times for us. Some of the commissioners were at the groundbreaking yesterday for the new hotel that broke ground on, which will be a 219-room hotel that's under construction now. Probably retain around 1,400 construction employees, and we're guessing around 128 permanent employees after that's up and running. We're going to be able to access the casino, and that's looking island, the Ohio River in Pittsburgh. So that's an exciting aspect. Another exciting aspect is that we've been involved in a reconfiguration of the almost virtually the entire property for the last, given more than a year, really. As the board's well aware of, but maybe the public isn't, we opened an event center recently, which has been very well received. We are in the progress and have been in the progress for many, many months now with total reconfiguration of our gaming floor. We constructed a temporary sports book, and it was successful, and we're doing a permanent sports book, which is in construction right now. And as part of that total kind of redo of the property, which is now happening on yesterday, Andre Barnaby, who's our vice president of gaming, will be testifying today, but he was at the 10-year anniversary celebration that Rivers had yesterday, and he's a 10-year employee. So a lot going on. The property is refreshing itself. It's expanding in Pittsburgh, and it's been a great property for us. You also know, because you see the statistics, that the property's been performing very well, and both on slots and tables games. So we're very proud of that. I had nothing to do with it, of course, but Andre and others did. What we're seeking here today is a reduction of 158 slot machines. We are
There's also a minor change in the actual size of the casino floor, and that is because we're building a new restaurant on the casino floor. By the way, there'll be another restaurant in the hotel when it's completed, and a new refresh of the bar area. So this has been ongoing for quite a while. We've been working with Kevin on a weekly basis, with weekly schedules, because it entailed removing machines and table games, temporarily storing them, putting them back on the property, back and forth, which we've been doing for many, many months. The bad news is that it's caused a lot of construction. The good news is it gave us a real experiment as to whether or not a reduction in slot machines would cause any loss in revenues. And the fact is that it did not, because during this period of time that we've been under construction, we've had approximately 2,500 slot machines, give or take. Actually, I don't have the exact number right, I put my finger on, but Andre can. So we've been under our allotted amount of 2,766 for some time, and despite that, our revenues have gone up, and our gross terminal revenue and coin-in has gone up. So with that, as kind of a preliminary statement, I'll turn it over to Andre to go through the slide presentation. And I'll tell you one thing, by the way, we added a slide that's not on the PowerPoint. It's the last one, which is a summary of all the changes that we're proposing. Andre?
Andre Barnaby, ANDREBARNABEI, Vice President of Gaming for Rivers Casino. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners.
Don't mind me. I just need to stand up for a few minutes.
No problem. As John mentioned, we've got a lot going on at Rivers right now, and we're very fortunate to be in our 10th year and kind of tearing the place apart and putting it back together. Right now, the status of things, as John mentioned, has been very fluid on our floor as we continue to refresh, reinvest, and really refocus on our guest experiences. So we can go to the next slide. We're kind of theming it as Rivers 2.0 because by the year 2020, we expect to have all of these on the list with the exception of the completion of the hotel completed, or the hotel therefore in progress. So to date, we've got some new restaurants planned. We plan on adding a new restaurant called Mian, which will be an Asian themed restaurant, to our casino, just off the casino floor area on the first floor. We also plan on redoing our steakhouse. It was announced at the end of last month that a celebrity chef will be coming into the Pittsburgh area to do a new Italian steakhouse theme. And our reconfiguration also includes a new casino bar as well. We will have our permanent sports book in place. We have a significant investment in new slot machines this year, specifically as it compares to some of our last years. And I believe that a confidential sheet was submitted for you all to review that shows the amount of money that we're putting forth towards new slot machines this year. As John mentioned, the reconfiguration, we've been planning and doing some testing since about February of 2018. There will be no impact to our table games operations in terms of the number of table games increased or decreased. There is a request for 158 slots to be reduced. As John mentioned, we broke ground yesterday on what will be a $60 million, 219-room hotel. And in the last 12 months, we've completed our temporary sports book. We've refreshed a restaurant into what we've now themed as Flipped, a fresh burger restaurant. We've added an event center, and as John mentioned, our revenue, which ultimately leads to taxes, has increased substantially. Again, the reconfiguration. Sorry about that. Again, the reconfiguration. I don't need it. You know. Good. The The reconfiguration has been underway for some time now. One of the proposed changes that we're seeking is 933 square foot to be reduced from the total gaming floor space. That space is necessary for us to add the new Meon restaurant onto our facility, taking a portion of back-of-house space as well as a portion of the guest-facing gaming floor. Again, the proposed reduction of 158 units, that represents about 5.71% of our slots. That does not bring us either to a point where guests are searching out different machines or where we're constrained based on some of the previous occupancies that we've had, inclusive of these times where our revenues have increased. So our current approved slot count today is 2,766. We're seeking to make that slot count 2,608. So that's a 158 game reduction. The games that we intend to remove are 9.9 years old. And I think we heard it earlier and we share the same. The games are old, they're a bit tired, they're very challenging to maintain, and from a manufacturer's perspective, they're what they determine as obsolete, meaning they don't make any new hardware or software for them, which is kind of challenging for us to maintain over time. We don't anticipate any revenue lost as a result of this. And again, our performance numbers, which I'd like to talk about here, have kind of shown where we are and where we're going. So of the machines we intend to remove, those 158, again, 9.9 years old on average. The average coin in per day on those games is $441 versus what we'll call the house average, which is the average of all of $3,547. The games we intend to keep are at $3,739. And most importantly, when we look at the GTR, gross terminal revenue per day, the machines we intend to remove are at $43 per day. Our games that we intend to keep are at $311, and the house average was at $295 when you mix them together. So you can see there's a substantial difference in what the GTR is between some of those games that have been around for some time and some of the games that are a little bit newer and those that we intend to keep. The removal of those games also allows us to focus more on quality versus quantity, as well as the configuration of the floor, which I'll dig into here shortly. As John mentioned, because of some of the construction and different projects that we've had going on here in the last 12 months, we've had some increases and decreases to our active game count on a temporary basis. The next chart just simply illustrates there's two trend lines in there. There's a blue trend line for our unit count and an orange trend line for our GTR, and the specific bullets for each month are on the permanent or the deep blue and the deep orange lines. Right around the November timeframe, we installed a temporary sports book, which required us to temporarily remove some slot machines in order for us to have space to put it. From that time forward, we have continued to increase our GTR, and our slot count has continued to decrease due to different construction projects and so forth. So we've seen almost a 7% increase in GTR with less games in the 6 months after they were removed than the 6 months prior to. And I've got some more recent data. The data here is through April because that's when we submitted this in early June for review. Here's just an idea also of some of the things that are constraining us. The new games, the state-of-the-art games, are much larger and have more bells and whistles, if you will. Cabinets are taller and cabinets are wider, and they just simply take up more square footage. And then there's another example as well. I think John kind of pointed it out to me is the difference between the day where only cars were on the road and now there's SUVs. And that's kind of what we're looking at. Here you'll see a configuration of our current gaming floor, and a couple of areas I know it's hard to see. If you go to the very center in the south, and I'll try to point, it's not going to work on the screen. In the center of the south, there's a small area where the 933 square feet will be reduced for Meon. To the left of there, you'll see a temporary sports book. It's got two archways that are seats as well as a whole bunch of dots that represent tables. That area will be vacated by the temporary sports book, and we'll reinstall slot machines that I'll show you in our next. And then right around the center, we have a center bar area called Levels Bar today. Levels Bar will become our future permanent sports book in our new configuration plan. And then we're also going to make some tweaks. The top left section is a whole bunch of banks that are either 6, 8, 12, or 14 long. We're going to reconfigure that to show some different perspectives from our guests, from a sightline perspective, as well as a guest comfort. So the next map, and I've tried to highlight there in red some of the areas that we just spoke about. Again, starting down the bottom end, our Mion restaurant, the left area that's circled will be backfilled with slots after the temporary sports book is removed. The center area of the casino, which was Levels Bar, will become the permanent sports book, as well as a new casino bar that will service both the casino and the sports book. That bar will replace the existing Levels Bar, which prior had 6 bar top slot machines. Our new bar will have 24 bar top slot machines. And then in the northern left corner is an area that's circled where it now has a circular shaped bank of slot machines versus the straight banks. And I'd like to highlight where we kind of started this back in February of 18 and planning. We looked at an area of our casino floor that was very underutilized, and we looked at how can we tweak that area to draw some guests back into that space. And we took an area that had 40 slot machines in it, and we replaced that area with 16 in a different configuration, a different pattern, creating more space and better sight lines. And the results, I think, kind of speak for themselves. In the 6 months pre and post, there was a 62% increase in GTR that those 16 games had over the 40 they replaced. If you look at it on a year-over-year basis, it was a 72.9% increase in GTR. Again, 16 games versus 40. And that's what kind of catapulted us into the path of really evaluating all the areas of the floor and looking for those types of opportunities to increase revenue. Our last couple of months, if you just look at our trend lines here, when we look year over year, in May, June, and July, we've had significant increases in each of those months, albeit our slot floor is down about 13% of unit count right now due to some of the construction projects that we have on a temporary basis. To John's earlier point, the level that we're at today, the number of slot machines we have on the floor currently, we're actually seeking to put more back on the floor, and that's where it gets tricky because we're under we have a temporary reduction today, but we're seeking to put more machines back on the floor. But at the end of the day, it is a 158 game reduction from what we need to have on the floor on a permanent basis.
Now, the last slide is not on this is one we did yesterday and didn't make it into the PowerPoint, but it gives a summary of all the statistics, and I'll ask Andre to go through those.
Yeah. So again, what we're here to request today is to be at 2,608 slots, which would represent a 158 game reduction. There would be no change to our table game, no increase, no decrease. We would increase our sports wagering kiosks by 15 upon the completion of our sports book, permanent sports book, which would bring us to 33. And our gaming total square footage would decrease by the 933 square foot for the additional restaurant space needed to service our guests. And our sports book, permanent sports book, would be 5,094 square feet.
And the smoking and no smoking, addressing the issues raised in the last presentation is set out here as well. We continue to meet the requirements of the Indoor Clean Air Act. That's it.
Questions or comments from
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, one other thing I should mention. I forgot in my little beginning. So it really is a red letter day because today we are also funding the refinancing that you all approved at the last board meeting. So we closed an escrow and it's being funded today, which is another mark of the success of this property in the Pittsburgh area. So.
Do you have anything you want to move into the record?
Yes, I'd move the exhibit, the PowerPoint exhibit that we presented with the additional exhibit which is attached here too, and also the petition, the confidential petition, the one that was marked up redacted as confidential.
Okay, so
thank you.
Enforcement Counsel, questions or comments?
Yes, sir. Beth Manifesto on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel, just a few. Can you tell us, please, out of the number of kiosks, self-serve kiosks, what percentage will be in smoking areas and what percentage in non-smoking areas?
We have 29 of the kiosks identified for placement, all of which will be in non-smoking areas. That would leave 4 that could be in a smoking area. We've yet to finalize that permanent location. We want to see what the impact is after we move the temporary sports book over to the permanent area and whether or not we need to backfill some kiosks in that space.
And Mr. Barnaby, I understand right now on the gaming floor you have 125 table games, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're going to be putting 3 back on. Once the complement is restored to 128, can you give us the breakdown for table game percentages in smoking and non-smoking, as well as the number of table games in smoking and non-smoking?
Sure. We will restore back to where we were prior to the temporary removal of the 3. That will give us a total smoking of 81 and a total non-smoking of 47, which is a 63-37 split, smoking to non-smoking.
Do you have a date that you project all of these changes would be done should the board approve the petition?
Yet, the project is approximately 10 weeks long, barring any construction misses and times. The first 8 weeks would be completed by the end of this month. The last 2 will be dependent upon the construction wall around the sportsbook coming down. Once that's removed from the floor, we anticipate the ability to fill back in that space in about a 2-week time period. So our target would be the end of September for all of that to take place.
If this is approved, do you foresee any staff reductions as a result of the changes?
We do not.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no further questions.
Do you have any kind of presentation this
We
morning?
do not, sir.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions for Enforcement Counsel? I presume not. Okay. Questions or comments from the board at this time? Okay, we're going to take this matter up. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see you.
I don't mean to have picked on Penn National, but the reality of it is we have 3 different gaming floor plan proposal modifications before us today. 2 of them made it at least very clear what their smoking and non-smoking areas were. And your proposal does not. I can see the percentages of machines and tables sitting in each way, but I can't really see, and again, my concern as a regulator is the statutory requirement that 50% of the gaming floor be one way or another. I don't believe I have flexibility on that, and I can't tell from your plan
Thank you. I meant to
what you're doing here.
Have those numbers here. We are over 50% non-smoking. I'm looking for the exact number. I think it's 50.10 versus 49.90 of the gaming floor. So it is tight, but it does meet the.
And is that because all of your pathways through smoking are labeled non-smoking?
We do not have all of our pathways through smoking as non-smoking.
So if I can look at page 9 or page 8, whichever one's easier for you to, but one of the pages where you show us, I guess it would be page 9 is the proposed slot machine or proposed floor. If I wanted to get from the non-smoking a section which I can't tell where it is to where the food is. How do I get there?
Sure. I'll try to describe it the best I can. And if you have questions, I'll try to tackle them as well. If we could start maybe in the upper left quadrant, that represents.
Which page are we on? 9 or 8?
The slide 9, please.
Thank you.
So the upper left quadrant represents our garage entrance. That's where we see about 80% of our guests parking and coming in and out of those areas. All of the areas inside of that space immediately around there are all non-smoking. So a guest could come into our facility, they could go directly to the right to one of our restaurants and not cross through smoking. They can go directly to the left to our new flipped restaurant and not cross through smoking either. As they progress towards the center and the southern part of the casino, that is where the smoking areas are. If you were coming in off the front entrance area has a vestibule area that's not considered our gaming floor space and therefore is non-smoking. But then that would lead you into a decision point of going to the right towards our non-smoking area or straight or to the left into our smoking areas.
And the new sports area that's kind of right there in the center with the red circle around it, remind me what its configuration is.
Yeah. So today that is it was a bar that was part smoking, part non-smoking. That new space now will all be separate sportsbook, non-smoking, 100%. And that casino bar will be half smoking and half non-smoking.
So then is the half that's smoking, I'll call it the left side that's kind of hanging into the gaming area?
It is. And that'll be, it's actually elevated inside the sportsbook side. So there's 2 different seating perspectives, either a high top on the outside or a regular seat on the inside.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know how we can do this right now. You're trying mightily to explain it, but obviously in a black and white picture, it's very hard. So I don't think we're going to get to the total bottom of that right at this moment. Commissioner?
Yeah, we have a drawing that we could have sent.
I can have one sent.
Yeah, that'd probably be helpful. Excuse me a second.
We just gave statistics.
Are there any other questions at the moment?
I just have one, and you're not the only casino to kind of propose this today. But, so you're reducing your slot machines. However, let's face it, most of your slot machines are going to be in a smoking section on the new gaming floor, as most of your table games are. Your sports book is going to be non-smoking.
Correct.
Is there a different customer for the sports book? Is that why it's non-smoking? Is it like because it's a younger customer, they don't like smoking? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is generally a different customer, at least what we've seen so far. Truthfully, we don't have any player tracking in the sports book, so we don't know exactly who those players are, but it's new faces. I can tell you that. I manage the sports book as well. It's new faces. It's a younger demographic. The majority of them do not smoke. Occasionally, you might see somebody get up to leave that sports viewing area to go to a smoking section, but it's not frequent.
Okay. And just in general, because I'm here for the state treasurer, and obviously revenues are the most important thing, and this isn't just for the rivers, it is very concerning to me that, and very concerning to us, that the solution to a lot of, the casinos want to implement a sports book, or they want to change. They want to reduce slot machines. And depending on what category you are, in some cases depends on where the money goes, but casinos were put into place in Pennsylvania for property tax relief. They weren't here because we wanted to add new businesses to Pennsylvania. It was a means to an end. It just is very concerning to me that it seems that the casinos, when they want to change something, their immediate response seems to be to eliminate slot machines. Our slot machines are old, our slot machines, I don't know, buy new ones. But at the end of the day, I find it very troubling that that seems to be the solution among all the casinos that have proposed today.
Well, if I could comment on that, the reason we presented the statistics that we presented was to demonstrate that that would not have a negative impact on revenue. And the board's used to people coming up and giving estimates and proposals and projections all the time, and that's what people do. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but we've actually experienced it. We've seen what happened when, remember, we've been operating the last 3 months in construction with approximately 2,500 slot machines, and we're not going with this reduction even close to that. So we've seen our revenues go up. And the point is, the other point is, and I'll speak for kind of the whole industry, we say the saying in the industry is that slot machines don't generate revenue, people do. So if it's oftentimes, and I've seen this in my life many times, where a floor reconfiguration with a reduction of slot machines will generate a whole lot more revenue. It's alchemy. I don't know why it is, but it's, I guess people are happier and feel more at ease and more excitement. So the whole goal here is not to in any way be negative slot machines, but to generate more revenue for ourselves and for ultimately for you all too. And again, I come back where I started. The proof is kind of in the pudding. It's been working as we go on through these temporary changes.
Any other questions at the moment? We're going to take a recess and we'll be back. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Sorry for the delay. We're going to reconvene now. Next matter is consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the June 12th, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the June 12th, 2019 meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Executive Director's Report. Kevin.
It's 12:18, so good afternoon, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Today, I'm going to provide some updates on the efforts of our staff in implementing expanded gambling initiatives in Pennsylvania. Subsequent to the board's last public meeting on July the 10th, board staff coordinated the implementation of interactive gaming in accordance with the Gaming Act and board regulations. Interactive gaming was offered to the public through the iGaming certificates held by Hollywood Casino, Parks Casino, and Sugar House Casino, respectively. Additionally, Presque Isle Downs and Casino has opened its retail sports wagering operation, and Valley Forge Casino's online sports wagering platform, operated by FanDuel, is available to the public. Moving forward, we anticipate over the next 4 to 6 weeks to implement retail and online sports wagering activity at several additional Pennsylvania casinos that hold sports wagering certificates. This afternoon, I am pleased to inform the board that video gaming at approved truck stop establishments will be implemented this month. We expect up to 5 locations to be operating VGT machines by mid-September 2019. These VGT machines have been tested and approved by the board's gaming lab. The VGTs will be connected to the central control computer system overseen by the Department of Revenue, and the licensed terminal operators have submitted and received approval for detailed internal controls covering all aspects of regulated video gaming operations. I would also like to point out that 3 new self-exclusion programs have been developed and implemented by board staff led by the board's Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling. Self-exclusion programs for interactive gaming, for video gaming terminals, and for fantasy contest activity are now in place. At subsequent public meetings, I will give you an update as to how much activity we get in the self-exclusion associated with the new gambling expansion initiatives. So that's my presentation this morning. Thank you.
Any questions for Kevin? Okay, thank you, Kevin. Doug, Office of Chief Counsel.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. First, before the board are 8 petitions for your consideration. 4 of those were heard earlier today during public hearings. The remaining petitions will be decided on the record by agreement of the parties. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all documents filed of record. The first petition today is Stadium Casino Westmoreland's request for approval from the board to conduct table games at its Category 4 facility. During the public hearing earlier today, the board heard from Stadium with regard to both the table game petition and their Category 4 license application. The Bureau of Licensing will be presenting the Category 4 application under their section of the meeting in a few minutes. In regard to the petition for approval of the conduct of table games, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection, subject to conditions outlined in their answer. And of course, the issuance of the table game certificate is contingent upon the board also approving Stadium for the Category 4 license, which Susan Hensel will present. With that, the matter is ready for the board's consideration of a motion.
Fine. Are there any questions or comments from the board regarding the Westmoreland table games petition? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant Stadium Casino Westmoreland RELEC's petition for approval to conduct table games and issuance of a table games operations certificate contingent on being awarded a Category 4 license.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is Presque Isle Downs petition to modify its gaming floor plan. And as you heard, they're requesting to remove 41 of their underperforming slot machines from the gaming floor, reducing the complement of slots to 1,525. Presque Isle proposes taking this action in furtherance of establishing its retail sports book in its facility, and which includes the placement of 50 sports wagering kiosks on the floor. The Office of Enforcement Counsel proposes that the board impose several conditions on the approval, which will be outlined which have been outlined by Enforcement Counsel in their answer. Additionally, the parties have requested that certain information in the pleadings be maintained as confidential, and we would support that confidentiality for those items is appropriate. And the board is ready for the board's matters ready for the board's consideration.
The scope of what we're voting on here is simply the question of the reduction in the number of games that are going to be offered. Is that the only thing we're voting on here?
You're voting on the reduction of the number of slot machines on the table. To be clear, the executive director has delegated authority to permit up to 2% reduction. Each of the matters that have been heard by the board earlier are over 2% and thus outside of the executive director's delegated authority. Therefore, that's why it's before the board to approve the reduction of slot machines. Other issues such as reconfigurations of the gaming floor are within the executive director's delegated authority, and those items, including in as much as issues related to the smoking versus non-smoking designations, will still have to be presented to the executive director within his delegated authority.
So in voting on this, all we're voting on is whether it's appropriate or inappropriate to reduce the number of games on the floor. We are not passing comment one way or the other about whether the proposed new floor plan is satisfactory to this board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Questions regarding Presque Isle? If not, I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Presque Isle Downs LLC's request to reduce the number of slot machines as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the parties' request for confidentiality be granted. To be clear, the board is not approving the gaming floor plans as presented. That approval is delegated to the executive director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board is a request to modify the gaming floor plan by Washington Trotting Association. And that petition seeks to remove 485 slot machines and 3 table games from the gaming floor. If granted, the result will be that Meadows will have a complement of 2,506 machines and 85 table games. WTA and OEC have also requested the portions of their pleadings be maintained as confidential. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the petition, subject to several conditions outlined in their answer, and that matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
And similarly, same questions to you, Doug, that I asked about Presque Isle. We are only voting this afternoon, on whether or not the reduction in the number of games is appropriate. We are not voting in any way about whether we accept or reject the proposed floor plan.
That's correct. Same answers.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Washington Trotting Association LLC's request to reduce the number of slot machines as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the parties' requests for confidentiality be granted. To be clear, the board is not approving the gaming floor plans as presented. That approval is delegated to the executive director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is Holdings Acquisitions petition for approval of a revised gaming floor plan, which seeks to reduce the number of slot machines on the floor from 2,766 to 2,608, or a reduction of 158 machines. Rivers has provided testimony as to the reasons for the reduction, and again, that the number of the machines removed will be in the area of the new sports book and a restaurant. If approved, the Office of Enforcement Counsel proposes 10 conditions, which are outlined in their answer. In addition, they have both requested that portions of the pleadings be maintained as confidential, and subject to the same explanation of what the board is approving, that is the reduction of machines and not the overall reconfiguration of the floor plan, which would be go to the executive director for approval. It's ready for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Holdings Acquisitions Company LLP's request to reduce the number of slot machines as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the parties' request for confidentiality be granted. To be clear, the board is not approving the gaming floor plans as presented. That approval is delegated to the executive director.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board is Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment's request seeking approval of a corporate restructuring. By way of background, Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment has been licensed by the board since December of 2007. Greenwood Racing is the 100% owner of Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, and Wachi Manukian indirectly owns 90.2% of Greenwood Racing and therefore a 90.2% interest in Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment. This indirect ownership interest of Mr. Manukian and Greenwood Racing is presently held through 5 intervening companies. The proposed restructuring would create a new entity, Kringle Holding Limited, for which Mr. Manukian would be the sole owner. Through a series of transactions, 3 of the companies which currently exist in that structure would be removed from the casino's ownership, and Kringle Holdings Limited would then take the place and have the 90.2% indirect interest in parts, which again flows to Mr. Manukian. Greenwood Gaming believes the restructuring is necessary because of legal and tax changes in some of the incorporating jurisdictions of those other holding companies. Additionally, Greenwood avers that the restructuring will simplify the lines of ownership in the overall corporate structure, and that no new third parties will obtain an ownership interest in Parks Casino. They do acknowledge that Kringle Holdings will need to file a license application with the board, and however, Greenwood asserts that the request for restructuring does not meet the Act's definition of a change of control because Mr. Manukian's interest will not be affected. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to Greenwood's petition, subject to conditions outlined in the answer, and this matter is now ready for the board's decision.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grants Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc. petition for approval of corporation restructuring as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that a $100,000 change in control fee be imposed. I further move that Greenwood Gaming request for confidentiality be granted in part.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Marquis by Penn LLC's petition for approval of 2 corporate overhead and shared service agreements. Marquis by Penn is a wholly owned subsidiary of Penn National Gaming, which possesses a conditional video gaming terminal operator license. Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association is also a wholly owned subsidiary of Penn National and does business as Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racetrack. In the petition, Marquis by Penn requests that the board approve a restated corporate and shared service assessment agreement between Marquis and Penn so that Penn, the corporate parent, can provide advice, support, and assistance along with corporate infrastructure related to the operation of Marquis' video gaming terminals. Penn will provide services to Marquis, which include business planning, procurement, quality control, financial services, internal control procedures, regulatory compliance, legal services, and marketing. And this would be a 5-year agreement with the possibility of a 5-year renewal option thereafter. Marquis' service agreement with Mountain View, for which it also seeks approval, is for the purpose of allowing Marquis to use existing infrastructure and operations from Hollywood Casino to run and manage Marquis video gaming terminals. And this is a 3-year agreement with a 1-year renewal option. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief requested, subject to conditions outlined in its answer. Additionally, OEC has no objection to the requested confidentiality in the matter, which protects the contracts entered into between various entities. With that explanation, the matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Marquis by Penn LLC's petition for approval of corporate overhead and shared services agreements as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. Further move that the petitioner's request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's request for approval of a shared service agreement with Penn Online Entertainment. By way of background, Penn National Gaming, as the 100% owner of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association and Penn Online Entertainment, Mountain View has a Category 1 slot machine license and does business as Hollywood Casino. Penn Online Entertainment has a conditional license to provide interactive gaming on behalf of Mountain View. Mountain View avers that the purpose of the shared agreement is to leverage the existing infrastructure and operations of Penn National subsidiaries and allow Mountain View to have access to Penn National's interactive gaming division. Per the shared service agreement, Mountain View is required to delegate all of its responsibilities for the successful interactive gaming operation to Penn Online. Penn Online shall provide all the services necessary for that interactive gaming operation. Once again, OEC has no objection, subject to conditions outlined in the answer, and they do not object to a request for confidentiality of certain information outlined in the petition, and this matter is ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association LLC's petition for approval of shared services agreement as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the petitioner's request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board today is Chelsea Plocker's request for removal from the board's involuntary exclusion list. In January 2017, Ms. Plocker, who was 19 years of age at the time, attempted to enter Mount Airy Casino by providing a false identification to security. The identification was determined to be fake, and upon being confronted, she admitted to having the false ID and was charged with a summary offense and permanently evicted from Mount Airy. Subsequently, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place her on the board's involuntary exclusion list, which the board granted until her 22nd birthday, at which time she would be able to apply to be removed. Ms. Plocker, who is now 22 years of age, is requesting removal from the exclusion list, and there is no objection to that request by OEC, so it would be appropriate for the board to consider a motion granting the request.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Chelsea Plocker's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Okay, next presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good afternoon. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals and entities: Ray Angelini, Inc., Jeremy Bauskill, Richard K. Santiago, Roger John Kendrick, Sergey Bornikov, Timothy Donovan, Matthew Davey, Stephen Havagaimayan, John Worthington, Takehiro Yusi, Robert Saucier, Triangulum Partners LLC NV, and Triangular Partners LLC NM. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to any of these petitions, and as a result, if the board grants same, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of these parties.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and the surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 5 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. In each of these cases, the entire record's been provided to the board in advance of this meeting, and in each case, the person that's the subject of the report and recommendation has been put on notice that the board would be taking the matter up today. If any of these persons are present and wish to address the board, I'd ask them to come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation before the board pertains to Malik Jones and his request to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit. Mr. Jones was issued a gaming employee permit in December of 2016 and was employed as a table games dealer at Parks Casino. In August of 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension of Mr. Jones' permit after receiving notice that he had been charged with theft and related offenses. The emergency order suspending Mr. Jones' permit was signed by the board's executive director on August 1st, 2018. Thereafter, a hearing was held at the board's Office of Hearings and Appeals, and in November of 2018, the board issued an order directing that the suspension remain in effect until at least resolution of Mr. Jones' criminal charges. In March of 2019, Mr. Jones filed a petition to lift the suspension of his permit, indicating that the matter leading to his suspension was resolved and that no criminal charges remained pending against him. Enforcement Counsel filed an answer, however, objecting to this request and arguing that the felony charges in fact remain pending, subject to his completion of an ARD program. A hearing was held. Despite receiving notice, Mr. Jones didn't attend that hearing, and as a result, the evidence put into the record was entirely put in by the Office of Enforcement Counsel, and based upon that evidence, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that Mr. Jones' suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
George Brown III is the next report and recommendation before the board today. Mr. Brown was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in June of 2013 and was employed as a table games dealer at Parks Casino. On May 22nd of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension of Mr. Brown's permit after receiving notice that he had been charged in 5 different cases with various crimes, including numerous felony assault charges. The criminal docket in this matter shows that in each case listed, the same offense, date, and location occurred but had a different victim. The charging documents did not specify exactly the factual underpinnings of Mr. Brown's conduct. A hearing in this matter was held on May 30th, 2019. Mr. Brown appeared at the hearing and testified on his own behalf. Ultimately, he testified that the charges do, in fact, remain pending against him. However, he was sure that they would eventually be dropped. After hearing all this evidence, the report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer recommends that, in fact, the suspension remain in place until completion or the duration of the criminal proceedings.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board today is the report and recommendation regarding Markel Walker. In September of 2018, Mr. Walker was issued a gaming employee occupation permit and was employed as a table games dealer at the Parks Casino. On May 3rd, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Walker's gaming employee permit after receiving notice that he had been charged with numerous theft offenses and other gaming-related offenses. Specifically, it was alleged that on March 9th and 10th of 2019, while working at Parks Casino, Mr. Walker, along with 2 other individuals, engaged in a scheme where he paid losing wagers, failed to collect losing wagers, and other such activity, which ultimately cost Parks Casino $5,585. As a result of these charges, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. Walker's permit as requested by OEC. A hearing was thereafter held on May 29th. OEC attended that hearing. Mr. Walker did not attend. Ultimately, after hearing the evidence presented by OEC, the report and recommendation recommends that the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board is the report and recommendation pertaining to Jason Van Tran's petition to be removed from the board's involuntary exclusion list. By way of background, in July of 2011, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Van Tran on the exclusion list for his allegedly possessing 15 counterfeit $100 bills and attempting to pass 10 of them while playing blackjack at Harrah's, Philadelphia. Consequently, on October 13, 2011, the board issued an order placing Mr. Van Tran on the involuntary exclusion list. This past February, over 7 years after placement on the list, Mr. Van Tran filed his request to be removed from the exclusion list. A hearing was held on May 7th. Mr. Tran appeared at the hearing and testified on his own behalf. He essentially testified he did not dispute the underlying issues that got him placed on the list, but basically indicated he had learned from his mistakes. He was young and has since that time gotten his life in order. OEC offered testimony at the hearing going back over the evidence that ended up placing Mr. Van Tran on the list, but ultimately did not necessarily oppose his being removed from the list and left it to the board's discretion. The hearing officer in this case recommends that after hearing all of the evidence, he believes that Mr. Van Tran should be removed from the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board pertains to John Marchetti. In February of 2019, Mr. Marchetti submitted a gaming employee occupation permit seeking work as a table games dealer at Chester Downs Marina, operating as Harrah's, Philadelphia. Mr. Marchetti disclosed his criminal record in his application, and subsequently, on March 13, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice of recommendation of denial of his application based upon that criminal record, which included a 2009 felony conviction, making him ineligible to hold a gaming permit under the Pennsylvania Racehorse Development and Gaming Act, as 15 years had not passed since that conviction. A hearing was held in August of 2018. OEC appeared offering that argument and the evidence of Mr. Marchetti's criminal record. Ultimately, the report and recommendation issued subsequent to that hearing recommends that the permit actually, in fact, be denied because it is statutorily prohibited that he be issued.
Are you Mr. Marchetti?
Yes, I am, sir.
Why don't you have a seat, please? Whatever you wish to say,
Hello.
please proceed.
Yes, I...
You have to be sworn in.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, I'm sorry. Please stand and be sworn.
I do.
State your name and spell for the record.
My name is John Marchetti, M-A-R-C-H-E-T-T-I.
Okay. Proceed.
I came in today basically to prove my challenges were mostly constitutional based on the statutory clause that they're using to deny my... I wanted to preserve my preserve my rights to proceed to the Supreme Court and preserve my objections to the denial of the application should this board determine to deny me the license at this time. Taking into consideration, hopefully, that I do currently hold an active license in New Jersey, and I do currently work in New Jersey dealing cards, which is the same license, same backgrounds, same job duties. You know, if there's, I believe that the board is allowed to make exceptions for its rules, regulations, and statutes, and I would like to ask you to do so. Reject the Office of Chief Counsel's recommendation for denial.
Just clarification, it's not their recommendation, but that's okay. That's okay. They're advisory to us. You had a hearing. That's where the recommendation came from.
Okay, well, the hearing officers, I asked to reject the hearing officer's recommendation and issue me a license so that I can work in this state and pay my employment taxes to this state where I live.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. I should say, are there any questions or comments from Mr. Marchetti or anything else like that at this time? Okay, thank you very much. Ask an obvious question of my illustrious legal counsel. In your view, do we have the latitude to ignore an express condition in our statute?
You do not have the discretion to ignore the express condition that's in the statute with respect to who's eligible.
If this was a regulation, we could perhaps, but this is a statutory requirement?
That's correct.
Okay.
Nor does the board have the ability to rule on a constitutional issue. I understand that
I understand.
Mr. Marchetti was simply indicating that
Yeah, he wants to preserve his rights, and I appreciate that. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on the law that we're operating under. That said, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes all the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you. Next, we have the Bureau of Licensing with Director Susan Henschel.
Thank you, Chairman.
We're
Close enough.
getting pretty punchy around now. I would note that the first matter that you're going to address today is the renewal of Stadium Casinos LLC Category 2 license for the casino presently under construction in South Philly. This renewal was the subject of a lengthy public hearing at our July 10th meeting, but we chose to defer the vote today so the board could review some of the evidence presented regarding traffic mitigation in the area. Having now reviewed all that information, the board is now prepared to take up the matter and issue what we believe to be is an appropriate order. With that said, Susan, you can begin.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be one Category 2 slot machine renewal license, one Category 4 slot machine license, 3 video gaming terminal establishment licenses, and 2 manufacturer licenses. In addition, there will be 995 principals, key employees, and gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be the consideration of 3 gaming service provider applicants and 8 registered gaming service provider applicants. The first matter before you is the renewal of the Stadium Casino RE LLC Category 2 license that you just referred to. The license renewal process for this entity is now complete. In addition, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has finished its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. As a result, the license renewal is ready for your consideration. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the Category 2 license for Stadium Casino RE LLC.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the Category 2 license renewal for Stadium Casino RE LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter is the approval of Stadium Casino Westmoreland RE LLC's Category 4 slot machine license. Stadium Casino Westmoreland RE LLC will be placing the casino, as we heard today, within the existing Westmoreland Mall in Hempfield Township. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve a Category 4 license for Stadium Casino Westmoreland RE LLC.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the Category 4 license for Stadium Casino Westmoreland RE LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing and with conditions to be outlined in the board's order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are 2 VGT establishment licenses for CHR Corp. Doing business as Rudders. VGT establishments are truck stops seeking to place VGTs in their businesses. The Rudders stores up for licensure today are stores 60 and 69. Both were previously conditionally licensed. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has now completed its investigations, including evaluation that the applicants meet the VGT establishment eligibility criteria. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with background investigation and suitability reports. Once fully licensed, an establishment can continue forward toward completing the steps necessary to commence VGT gaming. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that you consider the orders to approve the VGT establishment licenses, beginning first with CHR Corporation doing business as Rutter's Store 60, which is located at 4425 West Market Street in York, York County.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grants the video gaming terminal establishment license for CHR Corp. Rudder Store number 60 as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is CHR Corporation doing business as Rudder Store 69, which is located at 100 Grand Street in Hamburg Borough, Berks County.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment license for CHR Corp. Rudder Store number 69 as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
We also have for your consideration a conditional VGT establishment license for PFJ Southeast LLC doing business as Pilot Travel Center number 518. The board may conditionally license an establishment provided the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a complete application, and has not been convicted of a gambling law violation. A preliminary review of this applicant indicates that it meets this criteria. However, final approval will be based on the applicant meeting all of the eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination will follow investigation and site inspection by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve a conditional VGT establishment license for PFJ Southeast LLC doing business as Pilot Travel Center 518, which is located at 2210 Camp Swatera Road in Fryestown, Berks County.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the conditional video gaming terminal establishment license for PFJ Southeast LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, there are conditional manufacturer licenses for your consideration. The first is a conditional sports wagering manufacturer license for Amelco UK Limited. Amelco UK Limited is a sports wagering manufacturer based in London. It provides sports wagering technology and support services. The second is an interactive gaming manufacturer license for Evolution New Jersey LLC. Evolution New Jersey LLC is a Malta-based company that provides live casino solutions to gaming operators. Under the board's regulations, sports wagering and interactive gaming manufacturer applicants are eligible for conditional licensure if the applicants have submitted complete licensing applications and fees, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement does not object to the issuance of the conditional licenses. The entities satisfy these criteria. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order for Amelco UK Limited.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional sports wagering manufacturer license for Amelco UK Limited as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And next is the draft order for Evolution New Jersey LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license for Evolution New Jersey LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are principal entities and employees and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 9 principals and 3 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary licenses for your consideration. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 10 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 702 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits and 190 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the gaming employee occupation permits and the non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also recommendations of denial for 3 gaming and 1 non-gaming employee applicants, as well as the non-gaming service provider applicant, Metro Beverage of Philadelphia, and 1 VGT establishment applicant, AMR Trading Corporation, doing business as Bethel Food Shop. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request hearings within the specified timeframes. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing each of the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the orders approving these denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board deny the gaming, non-gaming, video gaming terminal, and non-gaming service provider applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, for your consideration are withdrawal requests. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with a list of 60 gaming employees and 3 non-gaming employee applicants. I ask that the board consider the order approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers: Billetier Electric, Inc., Jasecki and DeVriant Currency Technology America, Inc., and Video Waltronics, Inc. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 8 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you very much, Susan. Now we move over to Cyrus Petrie.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 11 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 4 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 5 involuntary exclusions. The next 6 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation or suspension of employee occupation permits and/or employee registrations issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each person named. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Bradley McAllister, McAllister, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Ms. Elizabeth Duffy. Ms. Duffy was found in possession of heroin and cocaine during the course of her shift as a buffet supervisor at Rivers Casino, Pittsburgh, and she admitted to using heroin for her shift. Ms. Duffy was terminated from her employment at Rivers, and her criminal charge for possession of a controlled substance is currently pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration issued to Elizabeth Duffy.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the revocation of Elizabeth Duffy's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Thomas Monahan, M-O-N-A-G-H-A-N, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Matthew Mantic. On March 8, 2019, Mr. Mantic was arrested and charged for sexually assaulting two underage individuals, ages 13 and 16. At this time, OEC requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit issued to Matthew Mantic.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Matthew Mantic's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Max Miller. In February 2019, Mr. Miller was arrested and charged for making numerous terroristic threats towards his coworkers at the retail store in which he was employed. The charges remain pending in Allegheny County. At this time, OEC requests that the board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Max Miller.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the suspension of Max Miller's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Timothy Sheitlin. On January 31st, 2019, Mr. Sheitlin pled guilty to theft for stealing over $1,000 in which he collected from vending machines as part of his job duties at a previous employer. Mr. Sheitlin never disclosed these charges to the PGCB or Mohegan Sun Casino. At this time, OEC requests the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration issued to Timothy Sheitlin.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Timothy Sheitlin's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Candace Thorpe. In December of 2018, Ms. Thorpe was arrested and charged with felony child endangerment and felony drug charges. The charges remain pending in Fayette County. At this time, OEC requests that the board suspend the gaming employee permit issued to Candace Thorpe.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Candace Thorpe's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
James Armstrong for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Commissioners, next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint to revoke Takia White's gaming employee permit for engaging in unsuitable behavior by improperly conducting financial transactions at Sugar House Casino while employed there as a cage cashier. Ms. White was terminated from Sugar House. She is not presently employed in Pennsylvania's gaming industry. Accordingly, OEC requests the board revoke Ms. White's gaming employee permit.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Takia White's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and their licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond in 30 days, as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in the petition are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed in the board's public website.
Questions? Oh, okay.
Who's up? There we are. James Armstrong for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Sean Owens on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Owens left 7 children ages 2 years old through 10 years old unattended in his vehicle in the parking lot for approximately 15 minutes while he engaged in gaming activities inside Sugar House Casino. He was formerly evicted from Sugar House Casino. Accordingly, OEC requested the board place Mr. Owens on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Sean Owens to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thomas Monahan, once again with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Ryan Mitchell on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On April 23rd, 2019, Mr. Mitchell was confronted by security at Rivers Casino for credit sweeping. It was discovered by PSP that Mr. Mitchell had active arrest warrants, and PSP attempted to arrest Mr. Mitchell, but he resisted and in the process injured a PSP trooper. Mr. Mitchell was criminally charged for his actions. At this time, OEC requests the board place Ryan Mitchell on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Ryan Mitchell to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place May McElwain on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On January 26, 2019, Ms. McElwain stole $700 from a wallet belonging to another patron at the Meadows Casino. Ms. McElwain was charged with theft by the Pennsylvania State Police for her actions. At this time, OEC requests that the board place May McElwain on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of May McElwain to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, Gabrielle, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition seeking the exclusion of Daniel W. Evan. On April 16, 2019, while at Valley Forge Casino Resort, Mr. Evan stole a voucher belonging to another patron worth $2,900.09 from an unattended slot machine. Mr. Evan cashed out the $2,900.09 voucher at a ticket redemption machine and left the casino. Mr. Evan did not make restitution to the patron. Valley Forge permanently evicted Mr. Evan. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Daniel W. Evan.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Daniel W. Evan to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Beth Manifesto on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The last item on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition seeking the exclusion of Aubrey Prysock, Aumbrey Prysock. On June 15th of 2018, Mr. Prysock engaged in table game play at Rivers Casino. Mr. Prysock played roulette for 2 hours and 5 minutes. During his play, he attempted to pass post bets 4 times and successfully pass posted an additional 4 bets, causing a loss to the casino of $496. At this time, we ask Mr. Prysock be placed on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Aubrey Prysock to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes our business.
Thank you very much. I believe that concludes all the business we had before us this morning and this afternoon. The next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, September 4th at 10 a.m. in this room, where the first order of business will be to conduct a Category 4 casino auction. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you all for your time and attention.